Welcome back to geometry. We're going to talk a little bit about the first chapter that we're going to tackle this semester. It's on triangle congruency. Let me go a little bit further back and talk about big ideas. Remember that you do have a textbook at bigideasmath.com if you want to type that in. Remember to log in with Clever. There are links also for helping you with this process in the helpful links and learning resources tab in our Canvas page. So let me go ahead and go to that. Oops, let me get logged back in here. Sorry, I try and make sure that these things are always jam-packed with nothing except useful information, but bear with me just a moment while we get this figured out. Okay, so geometry, here we are. Let's go ahead, we'll do the student view. This is what you should see. So far, we only have the one homework assignment. This ended up getting duplicated. I'm not really sure how, but I'll go in and take care of it. Let's go into the modules really quick, which is mostly empty. If you need help logging in, the helpful links and learning resources, here's your textbook. Here's a video on how to log into Big Ideas to see your e-textbook. And that should take you back to this dashboard. You've got a big old giant button down here that says ebook. Make sure and log into your geometry textbook. And the first chapter that we're going to be dealing with, so we did chapter 1, the basics of geometry, and we are just completely blowing right by chapters 2, 3, and 4. And we're going to start with congruent triangles here in chapter 5. So let me go over the basic ideas behind each section and what you'll be expected to know by the end of it. So the very first elements of geometry that we talked about points, lines, and planes. A point is just a single dot, right? It has no dimensions. Lines have one dimension, planes have two dimensions. And then we started talking about things like how far things are, the distance formula. We started talking about angles, which are constructed from two rays, right, or line segments. And if you don't know what those are, please go back into this chapter and take a look. There's lots of great information in there for you. But moving right along, because we're trying to make this a nice, compact learning session, we talked about angles, which are basically made of two lines or line segments, right? What we're going to be exploring with triangles is we're just kicking it up a notch. Triangles are made out of three rays, lines, or line segments. So you can't have a shape with just one side, right? A shape with one side is a line or a line segment, depending on if it goes on forever or not. Two sides is an angle, right? So we still don't have any shapes. You can't have a two-sided shape because that doesn't exist unless they have curved lines, but we're dealing with just straight lines for right now, right? So we are all the way up to having three lines put together, and we get our first shape, triangles. And so we're going to be talking about triangles and specifically the congruency of triangles. Can we tell if the triangles are the same size and shape or not? So getting right into it, 5.1 talks about the angles of triangles. And you can go through this on your own. I'm just going to touch over it briefly. But the idea is that if two triangles have the same angles, then they have the same shape. If they have the same sides and the same angles, then they're congruent. So let's go ahead. I'm going to turn the page for a second and show you how this works. So we're going to talk about different kinds of triangles. We're going to talk about different angle classifications. We'll be maybe touching on the distance formula and how you can use that to determine how big this triangle is. We'll be talking about interior angles and exterior angles and the importance there. The really key term that you need to ingrain in your soul is that triangles always, 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 always and forever, no matter what, have 180 degrees on the inside. So the triangle sum theorem is extremely important now and forevermore throughout the rest of this year. Triangles always have 180 degrees on the inside. And every shape, no matter what, has 360 degrees on the outside. So we'll touch on that more. But the triangle sum theorem is going to be like one of those absolutely key principles that you must know to do well this semester. Okay, so moving on. We're going to talk about, let me move forward just a little bit. We're going to be talking about the angles of triangles and how to tell what kind of triangles they are, how to find the measures of different angles. And we touched on this a little bit with special angles last semester, and special angles are going to be absolutely key this semester as well. So if you need to, go back and review that. That's what the first assignment heavily focused on, was these special angles and what to do with them once you know what they are. And then this is more practice on the triangle angle theorem that says that all triangles have 180 degrees on the inside. Anyways, we'll go over all this. Don't worry about that too much. But let's move forward a little bit. 5.2, congruent polygons. So polygons just means it has sides and it makes a shape. So 3, 4, 5 sides, 108 sides. Okay, this is the key principle that I want you to focus on for 5.2. Corresponding parts. So you know how we use little hash marks. Let me zoom in way in on this. We use little hash marks to determine congruent parts. So there's one tick mark right here, one tick mark right here. That means that CB is the same as EF. It means they're congruent. Congruent means the same size and shape, right? We're just dealing with line segments, so it's the same size. These are the same. The two tick marks are the same. So BA is congruent to DE. 3 tick marks, they match up over here, so it's a matching game, basically. That's all we're doing, it's a matching game. CA is congruent to DF. And so you can see all of those side measurements down here. Those are the corresponding sides, and then you can do the same things with the angles. 1 tick mark, 1 tick mark, 2 tick marks, 2 tick marks, 3 tick marks, 3 tick marks. It's a matching game, right? So A is congruent to D, C is congruent to F, and B is congruent to E. See that? Remember that congruent, the congruent symbol is an equal sign with a little wavy line on top. So that's congruence, same size and shape. And this has an interesting acronym to it that's going to come in handy as we study this. It's called CPCTC, which is the most useless acronym ever unless you can actually remember all of it, which stands for the corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So we're going to be talking about how triangles are congruent by looking at the fact that they have the exact same angles and the exact same sides. So if their sides are the same and their angles are the same, then the triangles are the same. That's going to be our launching point for 5.3. So 5.3 says, proving triangle congruence by SAS. So in this chapter, we're going to be using a lot of S's, and we're going to be using a lot of A's. And it will never be ASS, and we'll talk about that fallacy later. But with A's and S's, you have to remember that S stands for side, and A stands for angle. So we know that if we have all of the corresponding parts of a triangle, that we can tell its congruence using that. But did you know that we don't need to know about all of the parts? So this is our base point for understanding that we can actually prove that a triangle is congruent just using 2 sides and an angle in the middle, just by using the 3 sides, just by using 2 angles and a side in the middle, 2 angles and a side on the end. So we're going to talk about these different ways that we can prove that the triangles are congruent. And this is going to have more application in things like, carpentry or welding, or electrical engineering, or just being an electrician, or plumbing, or there's lots of applications for this, because everywhere where there's angles, everywhere where there's triangles, we're going to run into this kind of a thing. So just keep that in mind. 5.1, we're going to be talking about what kind of triangles are out there. 5.2, we're going to talk about how we can tell that the polygons are congruent. And then for the rest of the chapter, we're going to be talking about how we can use these different theorems to prove triangles are congruent, okay? And then at the end, we're just going to kind of mix everything up and see if you can figure out how to tell that the triangles are congruent without all of the available data, without knowing that all of the sides and all the angles are congruent. Okay, so there's that, and we're going to see how long that takes. I imagine that this is going to take 2 or 3 weeks, and then we'll have a test over chapter 5, and then we're going to move on. Depending on the time, we'll start covering chapter 6, probably just parts of chapter 6. And then we might actually jump to chapter 8 next and go back to chapter 7 if we have time. I really want to focus on triangles and save some room for the end of the semester so we can talk about circles and circumference area and surface area. So we will be doing all that we can. Very first step is going to be focusing on this chapter 5. In order to do well on chapter 5, you must know chapter 1. So if you don't remember any of this, please go back and just take a look at the vocab terms, do a couple of the practice problems, and work with me as we work together to go through this semester. If you have any questions, let me know. Please feel free to email me. Remember that we're going to have those tutoring opportunities. And moving forward, I hope that we're going to have some whole class instruction time as well, especially on Wednesdays. So I look forward to that. I look forward to seeing you and to seeing all the things that we can accomplish together. This is Mr. Reynolds.